Winter Danger by William O. Steele, Chapter 8. Sam will like this, Burd said with a grin. There's downwood enough to last all winter. Cage glanced at the huge sugar maple, the heartwood showing white and grainy where the trunk had split wide open last night. The other part of the trunk lay fallen beside the cabin wall. He reckoned that was the loud noise they'd heard in the night. Cage followed Burd around the cabin. Limbs were down everywhere. Broken branches hung from the oaks around the cowshed, and saplings were bent to the ground under the ice and snow like rabbit snares. Inside his 2 shirts and his flannel wrap, Cage shivered. No matter how close he hugged his shirt around him, the wind found its way down his neck. The cold burned his eyes till they watered, and every breath he drew was like swallowing a mouthful of scalding dittany tea. The surface of the snow had frozen into a hard crust. The boys slipped and slid as they made their way down the slope toward the creek. It was slow going. There was no way to get a toehold, and they had to clutch trees and bushes to stand up. They reached the creek, and Burd exclaimed, "Looky there, Cage! Froze plumb to the mud bottom." He walked out on the ice and stamped on it to show how solid it was. "I never seen the like." Cage nodded and stuck his hands under his arms and hugged himself to try to keep warm. He felt frozen solid himself. For once, he reckoned he'd rather have stayed by the fire with Sam. Ornery as Sam was, he wished Burd would hurry up. Up the creek they found half a hollow tree fallen across to the other bank like a footlog. On the ice underneath lay 3 squirrels, their bodies stiff and icy. Those squirrels should have left with the ones he and Jared saw going south, Cage thought. "Cage," Burd said sharply, grabbing the other's arm. "Ain't that a turkey in that tree yonder? We should have brung our rifles." Cage looked. "It's a turkey hen for a fact," he answered, edging toward it, "but it ain't a live one." Burd stared. "It does set funny, all whomper-jawed, but what's it doing setting in a tree if'n it's dead?" Burd slithered over the snow to the tree in which the big bird sat. He took a stick and poked at it till it fell. It hit the snow with a harsh sound, and there were big rounds of ice stuck to its feet. "Froze!" exclaimed Burd. "Now who'd have thought it was cold enough to freeze the birds in the trees?" Cage pushed the turkey with his foot. Even the feathers were stiff with ice. Game was going to be scarce for a long spell. Jared would have a hard time next spring, providing he lived so long. Cage wondered what a man looked like, frozen dead. "We can play a joke on Sam with this here turkey," Burd told Cage. He took the turkey and went to the edge of the clearing with Cage at his heels. Burd wedged the turkey up in a tree and tied it there securely with a thong. He turned to the other, a grin spread all over his face. "Thar now, don't it look natural?" Cage laughed. "It don't hardly look natural," he answered. "But it's so cold, the sun and the moon don't look natural no more." "Sam won't notice," said Burd. "I'll run in the cabin and make a fuss about finding my rifle. If he thinks I'm aiming to shoot something, he'll try to shoot it first. I'll let him come on down here and take a shot or 2 at it. He's so almighty hasty, he ain't likely to hit it, but if'n he does, hit won't fall. You watch now." "I don't reckon I'd better take no part in it," remarked Cage with a grin. "Sam ain't over fond of me now. I don't want to rile him up any more than I already have." "Ah, he ain't riled," Burd answered as they climbed the hill. "He's just jealous. He don't like to think about you shooting buffalo and doing all them things he figures he could do so good. But I'll do the joking. Sam gets so danged uppity every now and then I have to do something to show him he ain't all of creation, else I couldn't hardly stand him." He threw open the cabin door and ran to first one corner and then another. "Where's my rifle, Mammy? I left it a-laying right here." Sam jumped up. "What's after ye?" he cried. "There's a big turkey in that little young ash tree down by the spring. I'll get him for dinner. Where's my shot pouch?" Burd asked. "Right under your nose," snapped Aunt Jess. "What's got into you, Burd?" She stopped as Sam grabbed up his father's rifle and shot pouch and ran out the door. Burd followed him, grinning. "Them too," she sighed to her husband. Cage followed Burd. Sam was halfway down the hill already. He had seen the turkey and was so intent on it that he forgot to watch where he was going. He slipped on the icy snow and fell sprawling. He glided a few feet down the frozen crust before he could stop himself, but he held onto the rifle and jumped up, ready to aim. He fired wildly, and Cage knew he must have missed the turkey by a good 10 feet. "It's still there, Sam," called Burd. "Shoot again." Sam was reloading hurriedly. He spilled powder till it lay in a wide circle of sooty black around his feet, and twice he dropped his lead ball. Finally, the rifle was ready. It'd be a long time till Sam shot a turkey, Cage decided. He'd made enough noise to scare every turkey in Carolina and taken time enough to let them get clean over the mountains to Salisbury. The noise of the shot echoed and echoed in the cold, still air. "Missed again," Burd yelled. "What's the matter? You ain't even come close enough to scare it." Sam loaded and fired again. "That turkey's a-going to sit there and dare you to hit it," Burd taunted. "It knows you can't do it." Red-faced, Sam loaded again. He slid over behind a big stump and steadied his rifle over it. Cage could see Burd doubled up with silent laughter as Sam aimed as carefully as he knew how and pulled the trigger. For a moment after the report, Sam stared at the bird. Finally, he stood up and walked quickly over to the ash tree. "You're close enough to hit it, Sam," Burd shouted. Sam turned with his rifle in his hands and glared at Burd. Cage could tell he was mad clear through, and for a moment he thought the younger boy might even shoot Burd. Sam muttered something and started back up the hill, with the back of his neck showing red above his shirt. Burd was still laughing as he knocked the turkey from the tree and followed his brother to the cabin. He handed the bird to his mother. "Looky here, Mammy," he said. "Here's dinner Sam shot for ye." Aunt Jess took the turkey and felt its breast under the feathers. She shoved it back toward Burd. "Sam might have shot it, but it was froze long afore he roused out of bed this morning. Take it out of here, it's tainted." Cage remembered how his own ma wouldn't eat meat unless it had been killed with a knife or a rifle. But he and Jared had often had to eat drowned coons or deer killed by a lightning-struck tree. "Tainted or not, we'll have to be eating it soon enough," said Uncle Adam soberly. "It's pitiful how hard this weather's going to be on game. What don't freeze will die from lack of something to eat. Looky there, that bird ain't got nothing in its crop. See how puny its legs be?" Jared had said game was going to be scarce if the winter was bad, Cage recalled. The snow would long since have covered any grasses or roots or moss for the deer. Turkeys and the other birds would be hard put to find berries and seeds after all this wind and cold. For a minute, Cage was scared. They wouldn't have much meat this winter. Even if turkeys fell dead on your doorstep, they wouldn't be much in the way of meat if they died of cold and hunger. And likely the wolves and panthers would eat most of the dead game, and the snow would cover the rest. He and the Tadlocks might well be eating panther before the elm buds swelled fat and pink. "Well, we got corn aplenty. We don't have to start eating bad meat yet. I'll give this to the dog," said Aunt Jess. "If'n we have to do without meat, we can eat mush. I wish you boys had got more nuts for me." "We was aiming to, and then it started snowing afore we ever got around to it. We spent a heap of time clearing the new ground," said Burd. Corn! Cage had forgotten farm people made crops and kept a big barrel of meal to feed them through the winter. There was meal and a heap of turnips in the lean-to. They'd not famish, he reckoned, as long as the meal held out. Toward the middle of the day, Uncle Adam came in the cabin with a sprinkling of new snow on his shoulders. "The old woman's a-plucking her goose," he said, "and the wind's a-rising. We're in for some bad weather." The next 3 days, the wind and snow swirled around the little cabin. The snow piled against the door, and sometimes the wind was so strong the snow was forced between the tight shingles of the roof and fell into the loft. Hail rattled down the chimney. They hardly went outdoors, except to tend to stock and bring in wood. A big fire roared in the chimney all the time, but still the cabin was so cold that water froze in the piggins unless they were set right on the hearth. Martha complained all the time about the cold. Cage could see Aunt Jess was worried about her. Uncle Adam worried about the stock. He kept going out into the howling cold to see if the cow and the heifer were all right. Sometimes Burd went with him, but Cage stayed in. The cows didn't like him. He made them jumpy. Uncle Adam said it was because he wasn't used to them, and they'd get to know each other in time, but Cage stayed away from them as much as he could. Sam was still sulking about the joke Burd had played on him. He sat by the fire, carving something most of the time, or making a hickory broom for his mother. "I'm a-saving that little dab of jerk till later," said Aunt Jess when she served ash cake and turnips and shucky beans for dinner 2 days running. "We've used all the meat Jared brought already. I don't know what you boys do with victuals. Setting around makes you hungrier than hard work does." The snow stopped finally. The wind died down, but the cold was as bad as ever. When Cage stepped out of the door to get a piggin full of snow to melt for water, he could feel the air crackle around his face like thin ice on a pond. The snow lay deep over every valley and hill. A body could get lost mighty easy now, thought Cage. But somebody was out in the snow. Somebody was struggling up the hillside through the ice-crusted drifts.